Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Walk Beside Me. My name is Brooklyn Bird, and we're talking today, as always, about how the gospel of Jesus Christ applies to parenting. Today's episode is going to be a little bit more narrative, storytelling style than my typical episodes. Normally, I talk about how a principle that I've read or learned about in a parenting book that I love connects to the gospel of Jesus Christ, or I talk about how gospel principle can be seen in the everyday of parenting. However, I felt impressed recently to share my experience as a mom that has done grad school and worked for a little bit and now recently just quit my job. I want to talk through the questions I asked myself and the principles that guided me in each of my decisions throughout this journey, not to tell you what to do or to say that I did things the right way, but to share my process just because I think it could be helpful for other people, especially women who are trying to decide whether they want to pursue a career or stay home with their kids or do a mix of both. I know that for me, as I was making these decisions, it was always helpful for me to hear someone else's experience, what they went through, and it helped me get more clarity about my own journey and what I wanted from my life and from my career and from motherhood. So without further ado, I'm going to share that story. I guess it starts with when I decided to go to law school in the first place. It was before I was married. It was in 2020, right before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. I was in my undergrad and I knew at the time that I wanted to go to some kind of graduate school because I wanted to further my education, and I also wanted to get something on my resume that would make it easy for me to jump into a career, whether that was right out of grad school or if I was a mom, I would have something on my resume that I could go back to very easily whenever the time came for me to get back into the workforce. So I was exploring grad school options and I wanted to find some continuing education that would make me a better tool in God's hands. I wasn't sure exactly what that'd be, and I prayed about it a lot, but I wasn't getting any clear answers, direct guidance from God to go one way or another. However, I did go to a woman in law event with a friend who was going to it, and I actually wasn't even really considering law school at all at the time, but she was going, and I just thought, why not? I'll just go check it out. And while I was at that event, I was immediately impressed by how articulate and confident the women speaking at the event were and all the attorneys that I was able to network with at this event. It seemed to be an answer to my prayers. The whole time I was just thinking, wow, these women sound like they could be amazing advocates for Jesus Christ. They speak so well, they write so well, they carry themselves so confidently, and they have such an ability to be a light to the world, and that's what I want. It also helped that I realized that law school is a lot of writing and reading. I didn't really know that. I thought law school was just a lot of arguing, and I learned that there's lots of areas of the law that don't actually require being very contentious necessarily, and the most important skills you can have going into law school and coming out of it are just being a good writer and a good reader. And I have always loved writing and reading throughout my whole life, so that event made me think it would be a good fit. From there, I went for it. I got married later that year, and I still had a year left of my undergrad, but my husband was really supportive of my decision to go to law school. We didn't really feel ready for kids at the time, so it made sense for me to jump right into law school right after I graduated from my undergrad. I went to law school at BYU, and I genuinely loved every single one of my 3 years in law school. It was really fun to be challenged in school in a way that I hadn't been before. School has always come pretty easily to me, and law school was a whole different story. Suddenly I was surrounded by lots of really brilliant people who were all super high achievers, and I was pretty average. And although that was extremely humbling, I loved it. I loved being in an environment with so many people chasing big goals and big dreams. I really felt like I fit right in. I went for pretty much every extracurricular that I could during law school. I went for leadership positions. By the time me and my husband T-Bird were feeling ready to have a baby, which was right around my second year of law school, I was confident that I was going to be a full-time career woman and a mom, but my career would probably take up most of my day, and I was just going to figure out a way to make it work. I was surrounded by lots of women who had done this. A lot of my professors worked full-time even while having kids. A lot of my classmates had children during law school, which is pretty unique. I don't think you find that at any other law school, but at BYU, it's definitely common. My impression was just that you might not know exactly what it's going to look like when you get started, but you'll figure it out once you get there. Once you have the kids, you'll figure it out and you can make it work. So that was my attitude going into having Brea. Things didn't start to shift for me until I was mega pregnant with her. I started to feel like I don't know if I want to work full time. I haven't even met this baby yet, but imagining leaving my baby for 8 or 9 hours a day at minimum, because law firm work is usually more than that, wasn't appealing to me. I was working at a law firm at the time, and although I enjoyed the law firm work, it didn't seem meaningful enough to me to sacrifice the time with my baby, especially because my husband and I were in a financial position where I didn't need to work full time in order to support our family. My husband was making enough money, which was a super big blessing, and I know that's a unique situation for us. We didn't have any student debt, and not working was an option, so that started to be more on the table for me. My last year of law school with Brea as a newborn was harder than my other years for sure. Like I said, I loved every single year of law school, but my least favorite probably was my third year. While I was still enjoying everything I was learning, I loved my classmates, I loved my professors. Any moment that I was spending studying or at school, I was wishing that I was with Brea. With all this in mind, I had to kind of rethink my life. I applied for 2 post-graduation jobs during my last year of law school. The first one was a very prestigious one that lots of professors were encouraging me to go after. It was a clerkship with a judge. If you're not familiar with the law, all you need to know basically is that judicial clerkships are pretty prestigious, and it's basically one of the best door openers that you can have on your resume. I did get offered that job opportunity, and it was a great honor, yet it meant that I would have been working full time, so 8 to 9 hours a day. It was a 2-year commitment, and the thought of committing myself away from Brea for 8 to 9 hours a day didn't feel right to me. So I started exploring other options while I was deciding about this job offer, and I found a law firm called Imavisa. I was connected to them through a friend, and this law firm is a business immigration firm, which is perfect because that's the area of law that I wanted to go into. Their style was very different from most law firms. It was a lot more relaxed. There are a lot more remote workers at Imavisa, and I talked to the law firm owner, Jake, and he was super accommodating. He said if I wanted to work part-time, even if I only wanted to work like 10 to 15 hours a week, that was an option. So I had these 2 great job offers on the table, the judicial clerkship that would have been full-time, and then the part-time work from home option with Imavisa. I prayed about which one to go after, and as I was praying about this decision, I came up with a list of questions that I wanted to ask myself when I confront these big life-changing decisions. This list has been so helpful to me, and my husband has actually taken advantage of it. I've sent it to lots of friends as they've made big life-changing decisions. It's really helped me stay grounded in choosing the life that I want, that feels right for me and my family, and not letting myself get confused by what the world tells me I should do, what extended family might put pressure on me to do, what the culture around me might pressure me to do, but really being in tune with myself, my husband, and my daughter, and with God. So I thought I would share this list of questions that helped me choose between these 2 job offers at the time, and this same list of questions has helped me very recently when I decided to stop working altogether, which was just 2 weeks ago. There are 23 of them, so buckle up. Number 1, what feels like love? 2, in a perfect world, what would I want? What decision is closest to that? 3, what would I do if I didn't care what anyone else thinks? 4, what would I do if I didn't have any worries about the future or end result? 5, what would I do if I knew I would succeed no matter what? 6, compare gains and losses between the 2 decisions. 7, which choice would I be more grateful for 5 years from now, 20 years from now, at the end of my life, in eternity? 8, what part of me will die if I choose X? What part of me will grow? 9, what would Jesus do? 10, which choice more effectively builds the kingdom of God? 11, which choice feels more interesting and exciting? 12, which choice feels more like discipleship? 13, which choice reminds me of my patriarchal blessing? 14, which choice will help me develop Christ-like attributes? 15, which choice will help me become a better tool in the Lord's hands? 16, if worldly definitions of success didn't matter, what would I choose? 17, which choice will open more doors? 18, where will I learn the most? 19, which choice will yield more valuable connections and relationships? 20, which choice will enhance my relationships with my family? 21, which choice leads to more long-term happiness? 22, which choice allows more freedom? 23, which decision do you have to justify less to yourself and to others? One thing I want to point out is that there's no right answer to any of these questions. These questions are to really get you reflecting on, are you acting out of fear or are you acting out of power, love, and a sound mind? Are you acting because of what other people say you should do, or because of what feels true and right to you? As I reflected on these questions at the time of deciding between these two jobs, I realized that if I had ultimate faith in God and I didn't worry about the future, I didn't worry about the end result, I didn't worry about not reaching career opportunities that I might otherwise have, it became so clear to me that the best option for my family at the time was for me to choose the part-time work from home option. That was the riskier choice, honestly, because the judicial clerkship is, like I said, something so good to put on a resume. It would have opened a lot of doors for me, and it basically could have started me on a path towards becoming a professor if that's something that I wanted to do, which is something I've been interested in before. And if not that, it would have made my resume look so good that almost any job opportunity in the future would be easy to snatch up. However, I wanted to take a more faithful approach. One insight that I had during this time that really helped me came to me when I was speaking with one of the deans at the law school. I had spoken to lots of counselors and professors before who had pushed me toward going for the judicial clerkship or a full-time position. Their rationale was, if you don't go all in from day one after you graduate law school, if you're not working full-time, people are going to question that down the road. People are going to question your resume, they're going to question your abilities, they're going to question your commitment, and it's going to be a lot harder to get jobs down the road. However, I did speak to one of the deans, Dean Hamblin, who is amazing. If you ever go to BYU Law School, become his friend because he is the best. I spoke to him about this decision I was making, and I talked to him about how I did feel this fear from what everyone was saying, that if I worked part-time right out of law school, I was shutting a lot of doors to myself and I wasn't going to have the same opportunities that I would otherwise. And he said to me, statistically that might be true. Maybe if we look at statistics, the women who work part-time out of law school or who don't work at all do have a harder time getting jobs later in the future, but those are just statistics and there can always be an exception, and why can't you be the exception? That was so comforting to me, this idea that there can be an exception, why not me? With God, all things truly are possible, and I don't want to let what the world tells me is possible or these man-made limitations guide me in my thinking. I really want to come from a place of what is possible and trusting and relying in the Lord. The scriptures say that if you trust in the Lord, he will direct your paths. It doesn't say if you make all the right decisions, if you open the most doors for yourself, then the Lord's going to direct your paths. All we have to do is trust him. We might even make decisions that later down the road we wish we hadn't made, or we regret, or we think we could have made better decisions, but as long as we are trusting in the Lord the whole time, we can trust that our paths are guided by him and that he's a part of every moment. I also don't think that God has a perfect plan in mind for us from day one. He doesn't have a map telling you that you need to become a lawyer, or you need to work full-time, or you need to be a stay-at-home mom. So many times we want him to tell us exactly what to do, and a lot of the times he just wants us to use our agency, make our own choices, move forward, and then learn. If we make a misstep, that's okay. We can always pivot. We can always redirect. There's a really good quote from David A. Bednar about this. He says, if you are a good girl, if you're a good boy, you don't have to be perfect. But if you are honoring your covenants and pressing forward with faith in the Savior, then you are living in revelation. It doesn't just come once in a while, and the vast majority of the time, you are being influenced by the Holy Ghost, and you have no idea that it is happening. We have the expectation that we have to be consciously aware in the moment that we are receiving revelation, and that is not true. In fact, I would suggest much revelation is occurring as we are simply pressing forward, being good, and trying to get better with God's help. So I did take a leap of faith. I went for the part-time position instead of the full-time clerkship position, and there were moments that I worried what people thought of me. I worried that my law school classmates thought that I was letting down BYU Law School by not taking up this really prestigious position that I was offered. I worried that my professors were disappointed in me. And I had moments where I worried that I was closing doors to myself. But really, when it came down to it, I was excited to see what God was going to make of this decision, and it is what felt right to me based on all those questions I asked myself. I also knew very confidently that if it ended up being the wrong decision, if I realized a year into working part-time that I really wanted to go back to full-time, I totally could. There's always a possibility to pivot. That possibility to pivot has been really grounding for me and kept me out of a fearful mentality as I've made these decisions about my career and motherhood. I eventually was able to stop worrying that I was making a dumb decision, and I realized that often in life, the things that the world might call a smart decision is actually just the most fearful one. It's the one that is based off of thinking about all the worst case scenarios, and then we choose whatever seems the safest from this place of fear. Once I graduated law school, I studied for the bar. I passed the bar. bar at the end of July in 2024, and then I started working for Emma Visa shortly after. I worked part-time. I worked about 4 hours a day from 7 to 11 a.m. every morning, and I'm super lucky that my husband T-Bird was able to be the one watching Brea during that time that I was working. I think it would have been a lot harder for me if we had needed to get childcare, but I felt really good about it because I knew Brea was getting her daddy-daughter time, and that was wonderful. And that's how things went up until very recently. When we moved to Florida, things started to change a little bit. Brea really wanted to be close to me all the time, and I think she was just extremely unsettled by all the changes that took place. Every morning when I went to my office to work, even though I was right there and she knew I was in the same house, she was very concerned, and she would be crying for me sporadically throughout my work session every morning, which didn't really happen when we lived in Temecula. This was really hard for me. It was hard for me to listen to her crying and know that I was choosing my job over her when I had the opportunity to not do that and to be with her. I really realized that I was ready to quit my job when one day I was working, and behind my work laptop I have this vision board. It has a bunch of scriptures, quotes, and pictures that inspire me, pictures of my dream life, of the life that I hope I am creating for myself and for my family. And I realized as I was working, as I'm typing up a legal document, that none of the pictures on my vision board depicted lawyers. None of them reflected my prior aspirations to have a full-time career, to climb the corporate ladder as fast as I could, but all of the pictures were of moms playing with their kids at the beach, or moms gardening with their children, or cooking in the kitchen with their children. All things that were totally available to me, but that I just wasn't doing because I thought that I needed to continue to work. I thought I needed to stay committed to my job. I thought that I needed to make sure I kept my foot in the door to the legal world. In that moment, I realized that I was unconsciously holding myself back from the life that I wanted to create, even though that life was available to me right in that moment. Not only that, but my daughter was really struggling in my absence every day. I went through that list of questions again and prayed about it, and I felt really good about putting in my 2 weeks notice for work, and so I did, and I did quit my job on June 13th, so just a few weeks ago. A principle that has guided me since I served my mission, but especially since becoming a mom, has been the idea that I want to be someone that inspires my kids with her choices. They look at their mom and they think, wow, my mom can do anything, that means that I can do anything. And that was a big reason that I chose to go to law school in the first place. It was something I wanted to do, and I wanted to make sure my kids, especially my daughters, knew that they had permission to pursue the things that mattered to them, that they could order their life in the way that felt right to them. The purpose of life wasn't to just go to school and then stop learning as soon as you become an adult, but that you can continue pursuing the things that matter to you, that are satisfying to you, that help your brain and heart grow all through your life. There's a quote from one of my favorite books, A Theory of Objectivist Parenting by Rosalind Ross, that has a lot to do with this. She says, if we do not want to be warmly authoritative, benevolent dictators to our children, but we absolutely do want to influence what kind of people they become, our only option is to have an awesome, present, respectful relationship with our children and model how to live an awesome life. This is actually a far more effective way to parent because, regardless of what we think we're teaching with all our force and control, we teach what we are. The only way to raise a hero is to be one. So instead of obsessing over our children and trying to control them, trying to make them be the person we dream they could be, the best way to parent is to focus on ourselves and make ourselves the person we dream of being. For a while, I thought that being this hero to my kids meant that I was going to become a wealthy, successful lawyer as soon as possible, that I was going to become a partner at a law firm before I was 30 years old. But I've since realized that what being a hero to my kids really means to me is not letting what others say or think get in the way. Staying in my career just because it's the smart thing to do or it's the prestigious thing to do, it wouldn't actually be heroic of me. On the flip side, being a stay-at-home mom just because that's the biggest sacrifice or because that's what a quote-unquote good mom does also wouldn't be heroic. Neither of those paths would be heroic if they're coming from this place of fear and trying to prove oneself worthy to others, to the world, or to cultural norms. To me, being heroic is following my heart, being in tune with my intuition, and choosing a life that is most interesting and exciting to me, regardless of what other people think or what the world says is possible. Most recently, for me, being a hero to my kids was following my heart and choosing to quit my job and focus on being their mom. I no longer dream of being a top-notch lawyer, at least not right now and not as fast as possible. Right now, my dream is just to pursue what is calling my heart, what is going to use the skills and passions that I have now to the best of my ability. And for me right now, that is being a stay-at-home mom. I want to make it clear that I don't see being a stay-at-home mom as the objectively best way to live your life. That is just what's best for me right now. If I were to give advice to anyone trying to decide decide whether to pursue a career or to stay home or to do both, I would just say make sure whatever you choose is what you really want, and you're not doing it from a place of this is what I have to do, or this is what I'm supposed to do, or this is what I should do, but it's really, no, this is what I want to do. It's not fair to your kids if you choose to be a stay-at-home mom only because you feel like you have to and you think you should and it's an obligation. Honestly, if you have other things you want to pursue along with being a stay-at-home mom, I would encourage you to explore those other options and to pursue them, because maybe one day, like me, you'll realize, oh, I actually do want to be a stay-at-home mom, and then you will feel so much more confident being a stay-at-home mom than you would have if you had just gone straight to being a stay-at-home mom and never explored the other options for you. For me, I am so glad that I went to law school. I'm so glad that I had a job so that I could see, okay, I really want to focus on my little ones right now. No matter how hard it gets with my kids, I'm not going to feel like a victim of them. I'm not going to feel like they held me back from doing what I wanted to do, because I did try to do what I wanted to do, and I found out that it wasn't actually what I wanted to do. And I'm so grateful to have that clarity now. I still believe that God did call me to law school, and even though I'm not using those skills directly at the moment, they have prepared me for so much right now. It is such a blessing to have the comfort that I could go back and be a practicing lawyer at any time if that's what my family needs. I'm fortunate that we don't need that financial help right now, but if we ever do, it will be a lot easier to find a job than it might have been if I didn't have that on my resume. I'm also really grateful that I went to law school and had Brea when I did, because if I hadn't done that, I don't think I would be hosting this podcast. Because I was in law school, I didn't have time to take naps during the day when Brea was really little, which meant I was exhausted at night, and figuring out a newborn sleep schedule with Brea while not being able to sleep during the day was extremely difficult, and it's actually what led me to pursue alternative sleep methods like bed sharing. And because I found resources about safe bed sharing, I actually went down a rabbit hole of finding lots of amazing resources about conscious parenting, respectful parenting, and they are the resources that changed my whole view of children, of humans generally, and even my view of God. I would not have found those resources if I hadn't been this sleep-deprived law student when I had Brea at the time that I did. So I know that she came into our lives at the right time, even if it was challenging and even if it wasn't necessarily quote-unquote ideal and I wasn't able to be with her as much as I wanted to. I do think I'm a better mom for it because of all the resources that my desperation led me to. Another reason I wouldn't have this podcast is I don't know if I would be as able to make the connections that I do between the secular resources about parenting that I read in the scriptures. And this is something that my mom suggested to me recently. After listening to one of my podcast episodes, she said, I really think that your law degree is helping you make these connections that you are and see these patterns in the scriptures that match what you're seeing in parenting. And I actually really think she's right. And it's cool because that is the reason I went to law school in the first place, was to become a good tool in the Lord's hands to build the kingdom of God, to share his word and his message and his gospel. And it's really special to be doing that right now through my podcast. Even though these aren't lawyer things, they're using the skills that I gained in law school. So I still believe that God called me to pursue that path for a reason. No matter what you choose, you're going to learn from it. And as long as you keep relying on the Lord, it's going to be okay. You're going to learn the lessons you need to learn. Everything that happens in life and everything you choose truly is for your benefit. Even if you make a quote unquote wrong choice, that's actually awesome because you will learn from it. And at the end of the day, is it really wrong if you're learning? It's not. My husband loves to say, some days you win and some days you learn. There's no losses in life as long as you're always learning. One thought that one of my law professors shared with me that has been really helpful is that you're always going to be missing out on something. No matter what you do, whether you go to grad school, whether you have a career, or whether you're a completely stay-at-home mom, there's always something you're going to be missing out on. You really cannot do it all. There's no way you can work full-time as a lawyer and spend as much time with your kids as you would if you didn't have a job. It's just not possible. And so becoming okay with that idea of I'm going to be missing out on something, it's just up to me to decide what I want to miss out on. It can help you get unstuck and figure out what you value rather than being afraid of making any decision because you want to find some way to not miss out. And truth is, you're going to miss out on something. It's just figuring out what you're okay with missing out on. And that really applied to me as I made this decision to quit my job recently. At the end of the day, I realized that I would rather have regrets about my career and missing out on things in my career than missing out on things in motherhood. If I have the option to stay home with my kids because my husband is making enough money and he supports me in that, then that's what I want to do. I would rather look back and think, dang, I could have maybe become a partner at a law firm earlier than I did, then I would look back and think, dang, I missed my kids' toddler years and I'm never going to have the chance to get them back. My career will always be waiting for me, but these little young years with my children when their mom is just their favorite thing in the world and the only person they really want all the time, that's something I'll never get back. A couple more thoughts about the dichotomy between being a stay-at-home parent versus having a career. Back when I was in law school, I was talking to a friend who was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and I could tell that she was extremely happy with her decision to be a stay-at-home mom. And at the same time, she might have felt a little unsure of what I thought about it. She might have thought that I considered her to not be as smart or as driven or disciplined or something because she wasn't doing what I was doing. She wasn't going to school or she wasn't working. And she kind of expressed this sentiment to me of she sometimes felt like people saw her as being dumb because she didn't have a career, because she stayed home with her daughter. And I assured her, and I want to assure anyone listening that's a stay-at-home mom that doesn't have a career yet or isn't in school, if you are a stay-at-home mom because that is what you really want, you are not dumb. You're actually really smart because you are in tune with your deepest desires, and you've been able to block out all the noise from the world telling you that you should want more than just being a stay-at-home mom. It's really a beautiful thing to choose the life that you want regardless of what the world thinks. Whereas a generation ago, the world pushed a lot of women to stay home with their children, and being a working mom was almost looked down upon. Now it's almost the opposite, where if you aren't working, it's like, what are you doing? Are you being lazy? It's almost like you're letting down all the females in the world if you're not doing it all, if you're not having a job and having kids and able to handle it all. If you're not working while being a parent, then you're not living up to your potential, and that's bad. That's the message we get from the world, and it's really amazing. I respect all the stay-at-home moms who are able to block out that noise and find peace and joy in their decision to be a stay-at-home mom and let that worldly progression go for a little bit if that's what they want to do. On the flip side, I want to say if you are a career woman and you have kids, but you've chosen to also have a career because that's what feeds your soul and it helps you function at your best, you're not selfish. A stay-at-home mom might think that people perceive her as dumb, and a career woman might think that people perceive her as selfish, and I really wouldn't perceive you that way. It's not a selfish thing to pursue the things that matter to you in life and that feed your soul. And if you find that being home with your kids all the time is really hard for you, it's challenging, if you don't have a village to support you in that, it can be really mentally exhausting, and you are actually benefiting your children immensely by giving them permission to pursue the things that bring them joy and purpose in life when you choose to pursue a career. I want to make it so clear that I don't think there's one right way to do this. What is best for our kids is that they have happy parents who are getting the most out of life, that are loving their lives and sharing that love and joy with their children. And it's really hard to do that if you are making your decisions out of fear of what other people think. So whether you're a career woman or a stay-at-home mom, whether you're a career man or a stay-at-home dad, as long as you are doing what you truly want and you're not acting out of fear of what other people think, you are doing whatever is best for your family. The last idea that I wanted to share in relation to all of this is in response to a comment that I got from someone recently who knew that I had quit my job. She said to me, "Is it hard for you because you're so used to being intellectually, mentally stimulated all the time? In law school, you had so many intellectual challenges, and in your job, you're writing, you're reading, you're working for clients, you're navigating such complex situations, and now you're home with your daughter all the time. She's barely able to form full sentences. You can't have adult conversations with her like you used to have with your coworkers or your colleagues in law school. Has that been hard for you?" And honestly, so far, so good. I have only been full-time stay-at-home mom for a month now, but I actually find a lot of mental stimulation in motherhood. I wanted to share the ways that I have felt intellectually stimulated in motherhood because it might help someone who's in my position. There definitely have been moments where I felt a little bit of boredom or a little bit of restlessness, and being able to see motherhood through an intellectual lens actually makes it so meaningful to me. I haven't really missed my job because I'm able to stimulate my own brain all day through motherhood. A few of the ways that I still feel like I'm growing intellectually and mentally as a mom. First, I do listen to a lot of podcasts and books, but beyond that, it's also just a mental challenge to learn how to take interest in the simple things that my daughter takes interest in. And when I say mental challenge, I mean that in the best way. It is mind expanding to be able to notice the little things that she notices, whether that's a little snail in the grass or a cool looking cloud or some detail in a picture in a book that she's fascinated by. Trying to take her perspective and see what she finds interesting about it is a new mental challenge that I love. Also learning how to see past her little toddler expressions, her little toddler culture that she is working through right now, and see who she really is, see her heart behind it, is so fun to me. It is so fun to see the great human behind the screams and behind the crying and behind her underdeveloped speech. I love focusing on her potential and who I see she is underneath all of that. That is another mental challenge, but it's a really beautiful, fun one for me. In the moments that I feel a little bit bored, it's also a mental challenge, and I am practicing mindfulness. I'm practicing the ability to just observe my surroundings and what's happening without judging it or analyzing it. I don't need to be constantly racing in my brain the way that I was when I was working, but learning how to be at peace with my surroundings and just observe them and notice them without judgment is another great mental practice for me. Learning to offer my daughter unconditional respect is another mental challenge. She's a toddler and she hasn't quite learned how to communicate with respect in every moment yet, but challenging myself to show up unconditionally as the person that I want to be, regardless of how she acts. Again, it's a mental challenge. It's a really good one for my heart and mind. I also like to think about how Jesus would respond in every situation. How would he treat this toddler? How would he teach a toddler? How would he help a toddler see a better way of doing things? And that has kept me so spiritually connected to Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father. Taking Brea's perspective is always a great mental challenge. Really considering, if I was acting the way that she is right now, why would I be doing it? And that mental practice fills me with compassion and patience all the time. Another form of mental stimulation that I'm so grateful for in motherhood. And finally, there's lots of ways to continue developing my talents. Brea's really into drawing right now, and so I bought some sketchbooks and some books that teach how to sketch people and objects, and I'm so excited to become a better drawer alongside my daughter. It's so fun for us to develop our talents together. She also loves reading books, and sometimes she will read them independently, and I can read my own book alongside her, which is so fun. I love cooking healthy meals. I've bought a bunch of cookbooks, and I'm just going through them page by page, trying every single recipe in these cookbooks. That makes motherhood every day really fun and interesting, and learning and growing in new ways. And finally, I've had a lot more time for journaling and reflection. As Brea plays, I'll have my journal available so that if there's a moment, I can be writing and reflecting about the kind of person that I want to be in, the life I want to have, and start manifesting that through my journaling. That has been a great form of mental stimulation as well. Thank you for indulging me in this podcast episode. It's really fun to reflect on what's gotten me where I am right now. I want to reiterate that my path is not the perfect path, but it has been made perfect for me and my family through Jesus Christ, through learning, through growth, through trusting in God. I don't know what it's going to look like in the future. I don't know when I'll go back to work and what that will look like when I do, but I really trust so much in Heavenly Father. I'm not worried about the future. I know that if I need to go back to work, that He will open doors for me. Even if the world says that that's unlikely for someone like me, I'm really not worried about it. And I'm so grateful that we have agency and the ability to create lives that work for us, that are beautiful for us, same way that God has created this whole entire life and existence for us. We are creators like He is, and we are so lucky to be His children and have that ability to create and choose the way that He does. If you know someone who is in a position similar to the one that I was in a few years ago, maybe someone who just got married, is considering grad school, is considering a career, trying to decide when to have kids, I would encourage you to share this episode with them so that they can hear one perspective of how it can work, what it can look like, and also to give them the reassurance that they don't have to have it all figured out. Right now, I certainly didn't when I got started, and I still don't, but as long as you are acting from a place of power, love, and a sound mind, you're not acting from a place of fear, but you are trusting in God and doing what feels empowering and happy for you and your family in every moment, you are going to be okay. It's going to work out. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you all next week.